everyone, and welcome to another episode in our spooky Halloween Advent. This time, it's Mediterranean flavored.
Like a gyro.
It's pronounced Euro.
Like a baklava.
Yes.
Like a economic recession.
Well, that's not a flavor, but yes.
Like Rome, the spookiest empire to ever be in Italy. In fact, most empires are spookier than Rome, including several that they contended with. But yes, Rome, so spooky.
Sure. We'll say Rome is spooky. And
What do you have there, witch? What do you have to talk about that's so spooky? I'll bet I could stretch the topic of Rome and murder into being something more interesting and thereby more spooky than you could write in a whole hour and 15 minutes of script work, hastily rushed in preparation for this very shoot. Yes, you shall know my power. That's why they call me the Keeper of Spooky Tales and the Master of making stuff scary.
you just made up that last one.
Yes, because I am in charge of spooky titles. Yes.
Okay then.
The title master of horror is what they call me.
They don't call you that.
You don't call me that.
We're getting off subject. We're even making Yorick fall asleep.
It's okay, Yorick. It's okay. It's okay. You can sleep when she's gone.
Rude. On to today's video.
Alberic I, Guy of Tuscany, and Hugh of Italy. These three prominent Italian noblemen of the 10th century all have one thing in common: a willingness to shed blood for one of medieval Italy's most powerful and influential women. Marozia was an affluent noblewoman born and raised in the outskirts of medieval Rome. She had a handful of husbands and many children. But for the sake of brevity, we shall cover the husbands all and each in brief and focus mostly on the two sons who went on to be the most famous. Her firstborn, Alberic II, and that son what later became pontiff. Yes. And apparently becoming the head of the Catholic Church itself ran in this lady's blood. Don't believe me? Head over right now to Wikipedia and look at her family tree. They included it for a reason on that page. It's quite something, really. Marozia's first marriage was to Alberic I, the Duke of Spoleto, and Consul of Rome, according to the Holy Roman Emperor. He himself was a major church power player, being instrumental in establishing Pope Sergio III. Marozia gave him 4 or 5 sons. It's hard to say exactly how many, due to many sources claiming at least one of those children to be illegitimate. Though, oh boy, would that not stop this son from going places. And then Alberic I died. It was at this point that Marozia got hitched to Guy of Tuscany, the Duke of Tuscany, I guess. They married in the mid-920s, and that is about where this meatball gets really spicy. With the help of Guy of Tuscany, or perhaps in support of him, Marozia had the current reigning Pope, Pope John X, the only recorded mutant pope in world history. Pardon me, but I never finished this thought on tape, and I don't really have time right now to re-record this segment. So I figured I'd clarify. They abduct and imprison Sergio III here. I kind of start saying that's what they did and then lose my train of thought here. So I figured I'd clarify that. Thank you. Bye. Now, rather than sending him to a very special school for gifted Catholics, instead they whisked him away to a grisly fate, whisking him away to Castel Sant'Angelo and smothering him with his pillow in his cell while he slept. This all seems to have been in an attempt to establish a series of puppet popes to boost Marozia's power and prestige. Whether she was the sole mastermind of this strategy, or she was just party to the messy business at hand, it's hard to say, as Marozia was judged very harshly through a medieval, masochistic lens. Marozia is said, according to many sources, to have become the true ruler of Rome, and seemingly installed a series of puppet popes to enforce her bidding. In fact, in 1931, her supposedly illegitimate son, rumored to be the son of Sergio III, no less, became the new pontiff. And sometime after that, Guy of Tuscany died. And then Marozia married for a 3rd time. And unfortunately for her, this marriage would be her last. You see, Hugh of Italy was a rather affluent man who held a certain claim to the Italian throne. This marriage alliance would be a major boost for her personal power if Hugh's ambitions were to come to fruition. Unfortunately, Marozia's own firstborn, Alberic II, did not agree with Hugh's particular political assessments and decided to express a harsh objection at his mother's wedding. You see, he stormed it, capturing his pregnant mother and deposing and arresting Hugh of Italy. Hugh maintained his current title as Duke of Arles and kept his lands but lost his authority. His mother, however, was sent away to a convent, imprisoned for the remainder of her days. Marozia would go on to have a female child. Little is known about this young woman, but this humble keeper of spooky tales would like to think she went on to do something incredibly brash and bold with her life, just as her mother had before her. But who knows? History is a dark, misty forest filled with goblins and spooky ghosts. One will steal your wallet and nibble your toes. The other will steal your soul and nibble your soul. Isaac II, Emperor of Byzantium, was having a bad time. He had been deposed after a reign fraught with civil revolt and unrest. He had been blinded, usurped by his own brother, imprisoned, reinstated to the throne, and now he had to share it with his son, who had brought a not insignificant foreign army to reinforce his claim to the throne. You see, 8 years prior, in 1195, Isaac's brother had seized power. Alexios III may have been a shitty brother and a usurper, but as far as Byzantine law was concerned, he was perfectly eligible for the position. And as far as the Byzantine citizenry were concerned, at least Alexios III didn't have a long history of civil unrest. "At least my son is smuggled to safety," Isaac II likely said to himself while within his prison cell. You see, his son, the ironically named Alexios, had been smuggled to the west to safety by a group of Persian merchants. Little did Isaac know that 8 years later, his son would return with the Fourth Crusade at his back. He had brought this mix of opportunistic Venetians and Italian religious fanatics to enforce his own claim on the throne. And quite a claim he did have with army at his back. Two things he had going for him. For one, he had the right to the throne through Western European inheritance customs. And second, he had money in the form of the wealth stored in the Byzantine treasury, or at least so he thought. The Crusaders assaulted the city, but Alexios III fled to Thrace. The aristocracy within the city looked at the army outside of it and made the wise choice to give them what they wanted. They established a sort of dual emperorship between Isaac II and Alexios IV. And then Alexios IV really began grinding his father's nerves, as well as the nerves of pretty much everyone in the entirety of Greece and parts of Anatolia. You see, the treasury was a little bare, so he thought, what are political rivals for, if not, emergency money? Which is one thing, but then he also turned to the church and thought, what are extravagantly wealthy churches for, if not, emergency money? And then he looked at his citizens and thought, what are people for, if not elevated taxes? And after this, he came to a startling realization. A crippling experience that occurs to many millennials of modern American society. He realized that he only had half of the money he needed to pay his bills. So he went after his uncle and began plundering Thrace to make full reparations to his Western European buddies as they hung out outside of Constantinople, gobbling up food and supplies and generally being a huge eyesore. The ransacking of Thrace, however, was not enough to make the full payment, and the Crusaders were getting mighty impatient. It was then that an anti-Western faction within the aristocracy of Constantinople seized Alexios IV and his father, Isaac II, ruining Isaac II's day for the last major time by strangling his son and imprisoning the frail man. Isaac II died, either by old age or by poisoning, alone in a prison cell. It is probably for the best, as if he had lived much longer, he would have lived to see the Fourth Crusade sack the capital city. Byzantium would never be the same again. Fratricide, to kill one's own brother. Most would consider this a sort of ignoble act, a terrible deed. But for one of the world's most prominent dynasties, this practice was not only allowed, but often viewed as a necessity. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not an expert on Ottoman history, and there is plenty of misinformation stewing around out there when it comes to the history of the Middle East. But here goes nothing. The Ottoman practice of legal fratricide was started and continued by just about every sultan who ever lived in the Ottoman Empire. At least that's what you would think if you went by all of the internet sources I sifted through trying to find information on this topic. However, the truth is far less sinister and far more concise. As far as I can tell, the sultan who actually began this grisly practice was Mehmed II, who had spent much of his reign fighting a series of bloody conflicts and civil wars with seemingly most of his male family members, which seems to have poisoned the pot a little bit when it comes to his sense of faith and family values. Mehmed II codified this practice, and most unfortunately, his son, Mehmed III, followed through on this grisly practice, killing 19 of his own brothers to secure his own rule. Some among them were no more than babes. However, his heir, Ahmed I, did not kill all of his brothers or male family members. You see, he was 13 years old, and killing all of his male family members, of which there were not very many, would have left him in a bad spot should he meet an unfortunate demise. As far as I can tell, this is where the practice stopped being codified. But while fratricide was no longer enjoined, it was still often allowed within the Ottoman High Court. As a result, individual cases of fratricide still occurred with unsettling frequency within the empire, up until its eventual decline. I was originally going to find the spiciest incident of Ottoman fratricide. However, in light of the immense struggle I had trying to find clear information on Ottoman fratricide, I thought it might be more suitable if I instead took the opportunity to highlight the true origins and extent of the practice and clarify some things as best as I was able. Unfortunately, I have forgotten a few key phrases and words within my notes, which means I am basically going to give you the skinny on how legally condoned fratricide worked within the Ottoman Empire. Basically, a Ottoman sultan, before he commits a legally condoned act of fratricide, must consult an Islamic judge of high stature and rank, who would basically give him the yay or the nay. Basically, within Islam, fratricide is very, very much a sin and bad, as is killing of the innocent in general. However, the greater good is also a sort of value of Islam. As a result, a sort of religious argument could be made for murdering somebody for the greater good. So the idea behind this is, if your brother is going to raise an army, cause a civil war, and kill loads of people, you're supposed to be able to go to your high-ranking religious official and say, hey, my brother is going to cause a huge loss of life and lots of suffering if I do not take him out quickly. And then this high-ranking judge is supposed to determine whether or not your argument is sound or not. Now, this is politics of the medieval and Renaissance eras, and also the 20th century. So that's not really how it always worked. You gotta remember, palms get greased, political interests get pushed, etc., etc. Now, my hope by sharing this little tidbit with you is not to give you some sort of homicidal view of the Ottoman Empire in general. Rather, quite the opposite. I want you to look at people's claims about Ottoman fratricide, which often go along the lines of them practicing this for centuries and centuries, and it leading to the inevitable decline of their empire. However, this is just not even close to the real truth. It's got one of those tiny pebbles of truth to get you fooled. Don't be fooled, dear viewers. The realities of this world are grisly and horrific, but there's no need to blow them out of proportion, like some sort of proportion-spewing whale from hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Witch Bit. That's what I've been calling these, Witch Bits. I'm gonna admit, I fudged this one a little bit. It still counts. He's partially Italian. Italy's in the Mediterranean area. It counts. Okay, I'm going to say it counts. Also, I don't know where else I would put him, and he's kind of important. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Raven Grimassi, or if you want to get really technical, Gary Charles Erb. That's his actual name that he was born to. I think I'd go with Raven too if I was a Gary Charles. Sorry to all of you Gary Charleses out there. He was an Italian American. Well, an Italian, German, Scottish American. His mother was Italian and his father was German, Scottish blood. And he really drew to his Italian roots. Supposedly his mother was an Italian witch and her father practiced as well, and he took a lot of influence from his grandfather. He really helped preserve and help repopularize Italian witchcraft, which is called, I'm probably gonna butcher it, I'm sorry. Stregoria. Stregoria is an old, archaic Italian term, actually. More modernly, it's called stregoneria. Ew. They added like a little extra bit of letters. It's not that different. But hey, they tried. I'm also not fluent in Italian, so not a big difference to me, but I'm sure it was. And from what I've read on the practice, it's a really interesting Catholic-rooted folk magic that's not really practiced anywhere else. It's even different from other like folk traditions in Italy, which is really neat. I didn't get a lot of information on how it was different, but that would make a really cool video, maybe someday in the future. Grimassi, not only did he repopularize this tradition, he was also a writer of over 20 books, some of which I've read, and they were actually pretty good from what I remember. It's been several years. so don't quote me on that. I remember being entertained. In fact, I'd suggest one of the ones that I remember reading and being really invested in was Old World Witchcraft, Ancient Ways for Modern Days. It came out in 2011. I remember it being a really interesting read. His first 3 that he ever wrote were over the practice, the old tradition of Italian witchcraft. And I read some reviews on them. I've not actually read them, but it seems like they were incredibly well received by the community, and that they do a pretty good job of really explaining the tradition and where it comes from. And it sounds like it'd be a really good read. He is also just a really influential figure in modern witchcraft, in modern paganism. He really took the time to sit down, and he really put a lot of effort into the community. He was a practicing high priest for a really long time. He did tons of these books and articles and newsletters. He had a foundation he was a part of, and he even ran his own magical shop with one of his wives. He had a first wife, got divorced, and had a second wife. He wasn't polyamorous. Sorry, just making that clear. He actually passed away last year in March of pancreatic cancer, and he really, for a period of 45 to 50 years, dedicated his life to his practice and preserving practices of peoples who might not have gotten them preserved otherwise. I can't say that until I did a little research that I really knew how influential he was, but he was a really influential figure, and a pretty interesting one. So I'd say if you're interested at all, his books are a really good read. He's got tons of them out there, and he's just a really neat person to kind of look at in our modern history.
It's a bestiary, everybody come see some bees.
The chimera, don't know how it's actually pronounced. Sorry people, I've only heard it pronounced in really bad movies. The Keeper of Spooky Tales tells me it's not pronounced that way. Anyways, point being, it is an incredibly interesting beast. It's composed of 3 parts, and we'll later have another beast composed of 3 parts. It's got, like, the front part is a lion, and then like the middle part is a goat, and it's got a second head coming out. This is the goat head, lion, goat, and then serpent. And it's supposed to have a serpent's head on the tail, so I think they like cut off the front half of the serpent and just glued it to the back half of the rest of it. So it's got 3 heads, technically. It's poisonous, it breathes fire. In some cases, it's said to breathe a gas that can kill people or ignite if it like meets flame. Anyways, it breathes fire. It's a creature of destruction. This Greek creature. The first time I ever saw it appear in any form of literature was in the Iliad, which, fantastic. You know, go to war, get lost at sea for 10, 15 years, go home, find out that everybody thinks you're dead and everybody wants to marry your wife because she's hot shit. It's terrifying. You're a regular Greek citizen going about your day. And this fucking monster comes in, breathing fire, wrecks your town, eats people, and then fucks off to God knows where until some sort of demigod goes to slaughter it. No thank you. I'll find another part of the Mediterranean to live in. Anyways, the Chimera.
Hush a boy skeleton on the skull bone. When you fall asleep, we'll play a trombone. Huh? Oh, I think we're back on. Witch, you appear to have exhausted poor Yorick. I mean, it couldn't have possibly been my bloated amount of content for this episode. No way, no how.
He almost looks peaceful.
Oh, he's not. He's dreaming up fiery visions of death for both of us. You know the truth. His newly acquired undeath shall spell doom for us all if we do not tread carefully. Have you found a way to defeat him?
Not as of yet.
Good. We're all going to die. You should probably do the rest of the actual Patreon.
Oh. Please donate to us on our Patronus. And if you have an idea as to how we should defeat Yorick once and for all, please let us know. We are taking almost any suggestion. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment this moment. Will you quit your blubbering?
It's clicked.
Could you imagine being like so out of luck that you managed to get lost in the fucking eastern half of the Mediterranean for like 15
The Mediterranean's not that big.
It's like, where the fuck did the Israelites wander around, right? Like, there was nothing there for them to wander in.
Or out of. Like,
they didn't pass back through Egypt after they left it. Like, no. They wandered, like, regions where people fucking lived. They go into Arabia, just like consistently miss the pockets of civilization. What was the plan?
The Mediterranean is not that big. You'd think he'd be able to like make his way home.
Yeah,
like
you'd think
nothing.
he'd eventually hit like a place that had Greeks, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey man, let's fucking get you somebody who can fly that boat and take you home." Like, but no. It's like Sinbad, like you're wealthy and you've like nearly died on 2 voyages. Like, stop. He goes on like 8.
There are so many different
voyages.
tales of Sinbad. Like, I don't know how to even unpack Sinbad.
There are like, I think 7 classical tales, or like 5 classic Sinbad tales.
Yeah, but then you get into all the...
Sinbad canon.
It's pretty bad when you're like so overused that there's Sinbad canon.
He encounters a lot of Greek stuff too, which is neat.
Yeah.
Seeing the Latinized stuff become Islamized stuff. People miss that because of their prejudices. Because people suck.
Italian heritage. Murders of sons of Rome. And a beast most confuzzling.
I feel like my segment has been misrepresented in this intro. It's a lot more spooky.
It's about murders of sons in Rome. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Yes. Yes.
Are you sure?
So I think that's where she cut it. You're very wrong. You are like not even remote. Okay,
I don't remember what you're...
The holy Roman. You can finish it.
I always forget that they existed.
How could you forget that they existed?
I do not have an incredible depth of knowledge on...
which trial you are going to write about is the Holy Roman Empire.
I don't really know that much about the Holy Roman Empire.
Do you know what it fucking is?
I know what it kind of was. I'm not even sure where it was on a map.
How could... Why? This is the problem. You can't be like, oh, I love Vikings, and then learn nothing about societies contemporary to the Vikings. That means you know like 1/10 about the Vikings.
It's kind of fun to mess with his little leg. I wonder if we can get in the shot. I'm sorry. He's just got a little leggy. I'm sorry. Heirs of Rome.
No, you don't say it's wrong. So on today's video. We're on to the video. Oh, it's rolling! I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
Okay. We're done.